okay, if you've been watching all of these shows and have like definitive opinions, mine's just going to be like, well, I never watched the X-Files in the first place, but
Yeah,
I
like
know Dan didn't like it.
yeah, the majority of the shows that have gone on.
I know you love the X-Files, but you didn't like the new X-Files. Okay, then the website you watched didn't like it. Okay. I'm sorry. So he never watched it. He watched it in the day, but he hasn't watched the new one, but a website he likes did not like it.
You're listening to the all-new Culture Cast, Chicagoland's finest podcast.
I'm Jen,
I'm Nick.
and welcome to the all-new Culture Cast.
Yay! The Gorehound is off tonight.
Agreed.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yes. That was a good run. I feel like we really nailed that topic,
Yep. The Gorehound being gone, that's all we can talk about. So, no, the Gorehound, I guess he was busy with work this week and just had I think he was out of town or something, if I remember the email he sent. But, not an email, a Facebook message.
Maybe in Ohio.
Yes.
No one knows because no one pays attention to Ohio.
Well, almost no one. Maybe he's recounting votes. I don't know. But,
oh, no.
Yeah, so speaking of that, very, very briefly, to just continue on from our last episode where we had the election special, where we didn't quite say it, but we kind of hinted that we suspected Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency.
We did suspect that.
Oops!
Yeah, no, I did think it was sort of funny, because not only did we assume she was going to win, but we were just like, well, obviously she's going to win, like, who would ever let her do anything besides win? Well, the American public, that's who.
Yeah, so it's an interesting, I guess, Gorehound's prediction that we may see more female presidents in pop culture. I don't know, that could still happen. It could be a response to President-elect Trump's nomination. Or nothing will happen at all since we have another male as president, so who knows. But anyway, today we have a kind of a unique topic. But before we get into that, we have to do our regular feature. Jen, have you been watching anything of interest lately?
I did. Okay, so I saw the movie Arrival.
How was that?
I loved it. And I'm not a sci-fi person, like, at all. But, like, so it seems like every fall now we're going to get a space-themed movie.
Yeah.
I loved Gravity. I loved the first 17 minutes of Gravity. I mean, I thought Gravity was pretty good, but I don't know that it stands up for rewatch.
It's like you see it once and you're good.
Hated Interstellar.
I haven't seen that, mostly because of my Christopher Nolan burnout.
First of all, it's 9,000 minutes long. If you took the entire, like, film and you broke it down into, like, 7 short films and then threw out a bunch of garbage, you'd have 7 very good, like, Oscar-nominated shorts. But as it is, he's just like, no, I have to let Matthew McConaughey, like, win this. He has to win this. He has to win this. And I'm just, like, I'm watching it as an audience member, around roughly hour 9 or so. And all I can think is, like, I hate all of these people and I want them to die in space. Or on Earth. It doesn't have to be in space. But it has to be death, Like, I want all of these people to perish. But anyway, Arrival. I loved Arrival. Like, I thought it was really interesting. Because number one, it features a linguist as the hero, which I don't think you see too much of. It also features a lady as the hero, which you also don't see a ton of. And it really plays with, like, narrative structure in a way I thought was really interesting. Like, the fact that she's a linguist is not it's not a coincidence. It's, like, literally part of the plot. Not just that they're trying to communicate with these aliens, but in terms of things about learning other languages, like, come into play during the movie. And I just think that's really interesting. Because, you don't see a lot of that. Or, like, if you see scientists in movies, they're always just kind of like, and here's some science bullshit. And you're like, well, that's fine. Like, I don't really need to know, like, specifics. But, like, this particular scientist at this particular like linguist in this particular movie felt like, there was a reason they picked her particular field and stuff in a way that I don't always feel like comes across, at least to non-sciences such as myself. As someone who's definitely not in STEM, I don't always understand why they're, bringing in certain scientists or what they're talking about, or like if the things, you kind of have to wait for like Neil deGrasse Tyson to tell you if anything in the science movie made sense.
Oh, that guy.
I didn't know you had beef.
I don't have anything against him personally, but I don't like the cult that has surrounded him online. Like, Neil deGrasse Tyson can make a YouTube video where he, like, farts into a cup, and people will be like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever! And it's like, no, it's not. Stop being ridiculous about this guy. So, it's not so much him, but, like, the fan base around him that annoys me. You're saying about Arrival.
Yeah, good movie. People should go see it. I would say we should do it on the podcast, except, I know that you and the Gorehound don't like to see recent movies.
Oh, no, I got nothing against seeing recent movies. It's the time factor of seeing recent movies. It's not as easy to do as one would think. I would like to see Arrival. Hopefully with the holidays coming up, be able to go see a couple more movies because some cool, fun ones look like they're coming out. So, I don't know. We'll see. But, yeah, Arrival's definitely on my list, my to-see list. I'd like to check that out.
Absolutely. How about you? What have you been watching, listening to?
Not a whole lot lately. I'm super behind on the various TV shows I like to watch. So, like, our DVR is, like, 70% full with all the different shows that we like to check out. But the one thing I kind of been watching sort of irregularly when my wife has it on, and it's just good background, is the reality show 90 Day Fiancé.
What does that mean?
We first caught this show about a year ago, or I don't know, whenever the previous season aired. It is a show where one person in the relationship is from a foreign country, and for them to get their visa or whatever, they have to get married within 90 days. So they come over to the country and they got to prep everything for 9 days to get their wedding. So it's them really getting to know one another and cultural norms and family and all of that nonsense. It's such a trashy show. But there's one...
so these people have like met before, right? Like they're super long distance dating, right?
Exactly, yeah. They might have gone and gotten together a couple times, like travel over there, they travel over here. But in terms of like a legit formal seeing each other on a regular day basis, they haven't really had that so much. And so it chronicles like a bunch of different couples over the course of a season, and the final episode is whether or not they get to their actual wedding day. But anyway, they have a sort of a spin-off show called 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After, where they take some of the favorite couples from the previous season and found out what happened after the wedding.
Oh and God.
There's this one couple that is just hilarious. The guy his name is Muhammad. He's Muslim, but I'm not exactly sure what country he's from. They've said in the show he looks very Latino, but I could be totally off on that. Maybe he's from Tunisia. I don't know. I can't remember specifically where he's at. And he's married to this totally white trash woman, like just totally white trash. It was very clear during the original series, during the first run, that he was using her for the green card, like obvious, and she was just oblivious to it. And now, in the follow-up series, why this guy agreed to it, I don't know, other than maybe to get the exposure. But he's like run off on her. He's like trying to demean her and everything, and she's like, "I could get you deported, Muhammad." And
I mean, she literally could. Like, I feel like I've never gotten married for a green card, but like, if I was going to, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be well behaved about it.
Yeah. Like, he's very good. He's a total a-hole. He's good at manipulation, and this woman is just a complete idiot to begin with. Like, but he loves me. Like, he used to give like the lamest excuses about why he can't kiss her or do anything or whatever. I think the last episode I had seen with it on the reunion show, where she did actually finally decide to file for the annulment, which if it gets annulled, then he goes back. If they get divorced, right, where he's still allowed to stay because a divorce is different from an annulment. I don't know the whole legalese behind it, but yeah, that's the case. So it's wildly entertaining because it's so trashy. So trashy.
Sounds phenomenal.
It definitely can. There are other couples on the show too, but the final episode is a reunion show where all the couples come back. They're all in the same room and they're like, let's reflect on the past season. And you could tell, like, all the other couples were like, yeah, we know you're not here for us. We'll just be quiet while you talk to the crazy people who have been highlighted this whole season. So that's what I've been watching. Gorehound's not here, but I think we need to do a male crush of the week in honor of him.
Absolutely. And I will be doing that to honor Gorehound while he is possibly in Ohio, possibly not, possibly somewhere else.
He's with his second family.
With his second family. People actually do that. And I don't know how you do that.
That's the one thing. Like, I knew when I was in college, I knew people who would like have like two girlfriends and like control both the relations. I'm thinking, dude, where do you find the time and energy to do that? One is hard enough.
It sounds so difficult to like, because first of all, you have to have them far enough away from each other that they're not going to find each other. Second of all, you have to, you have to like call people by the correct name. I mean, God knows, there's only me and my sister, and my parents still call me by her name all the time.
Because they like her better than you.
Possibly. But, the point being that, like, there's no way I would, come home to, like, my one spouse and not call them the other spouse's name. I'd have to date two people with the same name. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I could pull it off. I don't think I have the memory for it.
So... But anyway, Gorehound is, for clarity, Gorehound doesn't have a second life that we're aware of, so...
He did not tell us.
So we don't mean to imply things.
About his secret family in Ohio.
Yeah, if the Graveyard Queen is listening.
Like Mentor, Ohio.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
We don't know anyone by the name of Julie.
Exactly.
And their 3 kids.
Right, all of whom already have little tattoos.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, so to fill in for the Gorehound this week.
He's going to kill us.
He's going to kill us for letting the cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to fill in for Gorehound today, I'm going to be doing a male crush of the week in the persona of the Gorehound.
Okay, let's do this.
All right. Okay, so my male crush of the week this week is definitely going to be Andrew WK. Like, in the wake of the election, I think a lot of people were feeling a lot of things. And Andrew WK, he just comes in with this column, like, we're going to link it in the notes, but we probably won't. And the column was so good, you guys, and it just really made me think about, like, our place in the universe versus Andrew WK. Like, we can never have his hair, but we can have his inner peace,
That was like a dead-on impersonation of the Gorehound. Thumbs.
I wouldn't say it's an impersonation so much as I physically embodied him.
Okay, I'll give you that.
While he was, in Ohio.
That was good. I like that one.
Okay. For the record, I have no idea if Andrew WK posted an article or about the election, but I also feel like he probably did, just based off of things that.
I think everyone's
said.
Yeah, I think everyone's posted an article.
Also fair.
Yeah.
Also fair.
You could just randomly take a dart and throw it at a pictures of celebrities you have on your wall, and they probably posted something about the election.
How do you know about my celebrity wall?
I didn't. I was just making a random comment, but that's interesting to know and creepy.
Absolutely. Okay, so do we want to get into our topic?
Yeah, I suppose we've killed enough time without talking about the topic, but the topic tonight is a relatively recent phenomenon that's happening in the TV landscape. I don't know what the right term would be. TV revivals, I guess, of popular shows, where a show would be off the air, like actually canceled, done for a good number of years, and then the network decides to bring it back for a special limited engagement. Examples include The X-Files, to an extent Fuller House, the upcoming Gilmore Girls, which I guess is released next week, right around Thanksgiving time. And actually, Thanksgiving would be this week because this episode is going up then. And a host like 24 recently had a reunion, or is going to. They had a reunion show, and now they're having a pickup, like a sequel series there. Some of these are successful, others are not. They kind of bomb horribly, and it's just a weird trend that I kind of wanted to. I just kind of want to talk about it a little bit. So, Jen, what do you think? What's fueling this?
Okay, so I think you've got a few different things, right? So, because prior to this, I mean, I feel like you had the occasional, you'd have like a reunion show or something every once in a great while, but it was nowhere near to the degree,
Mm-hmm.
And that was more like, we'll get together the cast of Taxi to work on this, like
a TV movie of the week or something.
Yeah, something like that, or they'd all show up on like Sally, Jesse, Raphael or something for an episode just to talk about where they've been on since the show ended. Like I don't feel like you had this. Maybe occasionally like a character would come back after the show was canceled, like as a crossover. I feel like I do. This is a complete side note, but I just want to point out that I also feel like there used to be a lot more crossovers, and I feel like there aren't as many crossovers as there used to be.
I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying.
Right.
I think they happen, but they're not maybe not as big as they once were.
Because I mean, certainly we're in a much smaller TV landscape, right? Each piece of the pie is so much thinner than it used to be.
Yeah, you mean too big of a TV landscape, no?
Well, exactly. In that there's no show that has 20 million viewers anymore.
Oh, right.
It's not as instrumental to have those crossover events. But I feel like it used to be, and I'm basing this mostly off of like my youth watching Nick at Night. But I feel like there used to be a ton of them. There are like two I can think of that happened this season. I think all the Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago, etc. All those maybe had a crossover episode this season. And I know New Girl and
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine had a crossover, right? Which I still haven't watched yet, but
it's
it's a thing, but like it's not. I feel like it's not as much. Okay, anyway, back to the topic. So I think you've got a few different things, right? So you've got this ability to like bring back shows in a way where you don't need to. You can put them on Netflix, you can put them on Hulu. You don't have to put them on TV, where you're taking away like valuable time. You could be developing a new show for much cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of it, because now you can stream it, so you don't have to like build a new audience on something that is only going to get the old audience. So I think that's one thing. I think there's part of it too is probably because TV has been more willing to embrace shorter seasons, more in like the British style. So it's easy to bring back a show for 6 episodes because people will agree that's a TV season, as opposed to, I feel like back in the old days, everything had to be 22 episodes or bust.
Right.
So I think that's also part of it. And then I think, look, you and I, both born in the 80s, we're good people, but let's be clear. Most people our age, not good people. And here's why I can say that.
Take that, 1980s birthers.
All other babies.
I resemble that remark.
Okay, Foghorn Leghorn. Here's the problem with everyone else besides you and I.
Okay.
There's a lot of like BuzzFeed nostalgia, so it's like, oh my God, remember when it was the 80s and we used to watch this show and play this board game and do this thing? And so like in a way that previous generations did not have that ability to like cater to nostalgia. Not that
That's
didn't
true.
exist. Obviously you have like your Happy Days takes place in the 50s during the 70s, and that's appealing to a certain generation and all of that, as well as trying to capture the youth to get them to watch it. But like, I think we're allowed to like indulge in our nostalgia in a way that like previous generations had no ability whatsoever.
Right, I could see that.
So those are my three things. How about you? Do you have anything you think is fueling this?
I think there is definitely a nostalgia aspect to it. The
Sure.
thing that's interesting is that a bunch of these shows, the reunions, they're from their original inception. It's been about like maybe a 20-year cycle. Like we're starting to enter, like about 10 years ago, the 80s nostalgia really started to hit big. Now we're sort of entering into a 90s nostalgia era, which is kind of weird to think about. But and like when the X-Files came back, that's a signature show of the 90s, and came back for 6 episodes or whatever it was, because they're much, much shorter. I have a theory that some of these revival reunion shows, if you notice when they're aired usually during a dead time during the season. Like the X-Files came out in January. 24 came out at the end of May and mostly into June. Gilmore Girls is a different case because it's on Netflix. Same with Fuller House. Heroes, when Heroes had their revival, let's see, Heroes Reborn. When was that? Alright, that one came out during the normal season, September to January, but it was, and that one got crushed in the ratings. Like no one cared about it.
Which one got crushed in the ratings?
Heroes.
Heroes.
The original show ended in 2012, and they had the revival it ended in 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, and the revival happened in 2015. Which was an odd show to be a revival, because it ended on bad terms. So
see, that was always a weird one, because first of all, I don't feel like you waited long enough to really get to the nostalgia,
Yeah.
And second of all, it seemed like it was a really popular show the first year, and then after that, just like everybody thought it was
Dumb.
the worst.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so it's kind of interesting. I feel like most of the other shows you've seen come back were, if not equally popular all seasons, because that could be pretty hard to do, but I feel like had gone on for longer and had been more missed.
Yeah, it left a bad taste in people's mouths, so it was a weird show for NBC to try to bring back. I'm still not sure what the logic was behind it, but yeah, now we have these other shows. I even think Gilmore Girls, to an extent, it's weird that they're bringing that show back. Because I knew it was a popular show, but I didn't know there was a huge demand for it to warrant a revival.
No, I think that's interesting, because I think, so I never watched the Gilmore Girls, but it's one of those shows that I feel like my friends who did watch it, and, I probably have more female friends than you do, loved it so much, and, like, still love it, and I know, kind of in the wake of the news that the show was coming, and then the show actually showing up, I know a lot of people were talking about, okay, well, it can't be this boyfriend, it's got to be this boyfriend, I'll just like kill myself if it turns out that Rory's pregnant, or, all sorts of different things, where people were just like very intense about it. So it may be one of those shows where like the people that loved it like beyond reason, and so maybe you don't need like a huge audience there. Maybe you just need, a very passionate group to come back. And then also, and then just some casual fans who are like, I never really finished it after the third season, but I'm kind of curious what they're up to.
Yeah, and I think you raised a good point earlier. Because the show is popular, but not like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever popular. I think that's why it's a perfect home for Netflix.
Right.
Because Netflix, with their original programming, it's a great business model because they work straight off of subscriptions. and they're probably, and I have no insider knowledge of this, just to be clear, but they've probably already made their money back on the show before it even aired.
Well, nobody, to be clear, like nobody outside of Netflix knows what Netflix numbers are.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who say they know what it is or what have you, but they don't release any of that.
Right, yeah. With the shows that are coming back, do you feel we're going to get to a point where this is going to become a big thing, where they start bringing back every single show under the sun that they feel they could squeeze a dime out of?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I think there will come a point at which people will get sort of bored of this. You look at something like Full House, and everyone seemed very excited when they announced they were bringing it back, even though, I haven't rewatched the show in years, but I fully admit I loved it when I was 8. But it wasn't like an objectively good show, right? Like objectively, it was terrible.
Right.
So then I feel like a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, this is going to be so great when they bring it back," and then they watched it, and it was like an adult version of this terrible show. And I mean, people must have watched it. People say that a lot of people watched it. Now, again, no one seems to have access to these Netflix numbers, so who knows if that's accurate? But they're bringing it back for a second season, so it must have done well enough. But like, I think there will come a point at which people will go, that show wasn't great in the first place. And as you keep bringing, more and more shows back, I mean, consider, Netflix says they want to make half of their content in the future be all original programming. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying they can't do it. I mean, people are already saying that they've gotten rid of a bunch of, non-original programming. But I will say, I kind of look at it and I say, well, that's an interesting goal, but they're going to run into the problem where eventually, you can only watch so many shows at a time. And, so if they have Fuller House going up against Orange is the New Black going against, whatever, the Gilmore Girls, and, eventually you're going to run into the problem where you have so much original content and people aren't going to watch everything you bring out,
Right.
So that's this is Thor here. I just had to chime in since I wrote a paper on this.
Here's Thor.
Sorry about that. When you were talking about, not to get into my opinions on this, just strictly the Netflix subscriber stuff, I thought you'd find interesting that, yeah, you're right, because if they, release their numbers to be like, look at how many people watch our shows, then the producers of Full House would be like, oh my God, give us all the money next. So instead their negotiations are very, Netflix is like, well, who knows? But what people have been able to do is they look at how much bandwidth Netflix is using, because that coming in and out of their all Netflix's data servers is public information through the publicly traded cable companies and such that run in and out of Netflix's headquarters. So what people do is they look at how much the data goes up when one of these shows is released, because they're always released on a weekend. So like it was with Arrested. No, it was the biggest one. I think it was when the newest Orange is the New Black came out, whichever the biggest event series Netflix has had. It was something like 15% of all internet content at one point that weekend was people watching Netflix. Normally it's 4% or less. So that's how they're like, well, look, clearly there was this big surge. So presumably everyone did just wake up on Saturday morning and decide they really, really, really had to watch season 2 of the Gilmore Girls. Sorry, that was boring. Just thought. I'm leaving now.
The more you know.
Okay, so I guess there is some sort of method how people are trying to figure out who's watching these shows.
Right.
The one caveat there would be, of course, that couldn't possibly measure how people who do decide in the middle of a Tuesday, 3 months later to start watching Orange is the New Black or watch the Gilmore Girls revival in, July. Mm-hmm. So obviously that doesn't get those kind of stragglers. But then, in general, TV doesn't track people who take, as long as a time to watch TV as they can,
And movies are kind of the same way. Studios, all they care about is that opening weekend box office. If it doesn't meet their certain amount, the movie's automatically written off as a flop. Maybe if
it's too bad, because there are a lot of movies that kind of find an audience with
right.
Good reviews and word of mouth and, everybody telling their friends to go see, XYZ.
Yeah. XYZ is a great movie. But
Really, it is.
But yeah, and there are some movies that have slow burns that they build up their money over time with a steady growth. But yeah, so anyway, we're kind of getting off topic with that sort of thing. But in general, with the TV revivals, so you're thinking eventually people are going to be like, no more. We want to see new stuff. We don't care about old stuff.
I don't know if it's that they're going to, specifically say we don't care about old stuff so much as I think Netflix is eventually going to start cannibalizing itself. If they're really talking about wanting to make half of their content be original programming, eventually, right now it seems like they're kind of in a groove where every month or so they release a new show. I mean, you can release 6 shows in a weekend, but if you do, people are going to have to make choices. And one of the other main problems, I think, with the kind of like Netflix model is that, a lot of people, once the show has been out for a few weeks or a few months, a lot of people aren't going to bother watching it because you don't have that like chance to really like build up an audience. People kind of watch it, they binge watch it or they watch an episode a week or something, but I feel like it's a lot harder to kind of build a fan base or if you're a lot of what these shows that end up on Netflix, as original programming, a lot of what helps that is the buzz and is the like currency of the show. Mm-hmm. So if you're releasing 6 things a weekend sometime in the future, you're going to lose out on a lot of people who are like, okay, well, I remember my friends were tweeting about that like 6 months ago, but, is there really a point in watching it now? Especially once they've canceled it or once, if they're not going to renew it or, if the show has kind of like lost its shininess. So, so I'm not saying it won't keep happening, but I am saying I think people are going to, they're going to get kind of bored with the format. I think nostalgia is probably here to stay, right? Like, mm-hmm. We can't un-BuzzFeed list ourselves. And if anything, I think, it'll be sort of interesting to see if we go more the way of like Heroes or if we go more the way of like, the X-Files. The X-Files was off the air for, years and years mm-hmm. versus Heroes waiting 5 years. They talk about, the kids today maybe existing more in terms of like micro generations. In other words, kids who grew up with a cell phone versus kids who didn't grow up with a cell phone may only be 3 years apart, but it's an entirely different situation.
Yeah.
So it may be that, in the future, the cycle is even shorter, show gets canceled and 3 years later, we're having the revival show as opposed to having to wait 15 years as you might with the X-Files.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point on that with different groups kind of moving at different paths there. It's I feel like within the last few years that there's been more and more attention trying to make like, hey, look who's coming back in your face, and it's just a weird phenomenon. I'm looking at a list here off of Wikipedia, and I'm looking at the different shows that have had quote-unquote revivals. And I don't know how many of these I would consider a revival versus a spinoff. Like, you had Boy Meets World, now you have Girl Meets World. You had Beverly Hills 90210, and now recently you had just the spin-off sequel series 90210, which was, I guess, dealt with their kids or something. So it's this weird sort of, like, when it comes to the revival, what's considered the actual revival and what's considered something that's more of a sequel there, and what's going to work and what's not going to work. Like, the X-Files worked. Creatively may not have, but it did well. And that aired on television, and that's the thing that surprised me how well this is doing, because it aired on TV. I'm sure the fact that it kind of aired in a dead time during the season helped its chances, but like, I don't know. They a couple years back they had. Do you remember the TV show Dallas?
I do.
They had the revival series from 2012. It lasted 3 seasons before getting canceled. Again, that was on network TV. What was it?
And that one did have some of the same actors, I believe.
Yeah, it had the 3 core actors from the original show, and then several other actors who appeared on the original show guest starred on it at various points. So, I mean, that was very much entrenched. Like they said, consider this season 24 of the series, and you just haven't seen the past X amount of years. So there's definitely that. But again, like, it was huge when it first came out. I remember it was a lot of people were talking about it. It was excitement. And then maybe after Larry Hagman died, I don't know, no one talked about it, and it was quietly canceled at the end of its third season. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I think some of the shows that they're trying to remake or redo or revive are kind of head-scratching, like the aforementioned Heroes, and at one point in time they were trying to bring back the TV show Coach, starring Craig T. Nelson.
They did.
I remember when that was first announced, I'm thinking, is there really an audience for that? I mean, it was a CBS comedy from the 80s and early 90s. Who remembers that show?
I mean, like, mildly, but like, so it's really interesting. I read an article on the AV Club that was looking at Home Improvement, which is another show that when I was 8, I watched a lot of. Mm-hmm. But then, it's also one that seems to have kind of missed the nostalgia bubble. And they were kind of, among other things, discussing why, we don't see all these like listicles about that show, or why there don't really seem to be fans clamoring for a revival of Home Improvement. And one thing they said, which I think is really an interesting point, and one I'd like to kind of discuss with you here.
Sure.
So they said, one of the reasons why this show isn't getting that sort of nostalgia buzz, or isn't getting that, demand for revival, is that the show wasn't aimed at kids. Like, kids watched it, and there were kids on the show. But ultimately, the end of the episode was Tim and Jill being like, oh, yeah, we really learned a lesson about, XYZ. Sure are glad, So the show was really framed in terms of the parents. And if a show is framed in terms of the parents, like, there are no 60-year-olds really clamoring for these revival shows. It's all young people. So the show had to originally be aimed at them. So
can I counter that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go for it.
The X-Files.
Okay.
I mean, it was a huge cultural phenomenon.
Sure.
But I wouldn't say that was kid-directed. If anything, there were some episodes that kids had no business watching. But yet that was deemed to come back.
That's true. Okay, so so there may be there might be a slight difference in that we're talking about so the other thing that's really interesting about the Netflix revivals versus, say, like the X-Files, because the X-Files originally aired on Fox, presumably was a Fox property, and then was brought back by Fox. So
True.
Fox stood to make all the money off of it, right? Whereas a lot of times you can kind of tell what shows will come back, and it has to do with who owns the rights to the show. So who makes the money off the repeats and the DVDs and, anything else you might sell related to the show. So a lot of times there will be these kind of splits where, like, Fox is the one that's airing the show, but, like, NBC is the one producing the show, or vice versa. I don't entirely understand how that works, or what the difference is there, or like why that happens. But so they're a lot more likely to try to keep a show on the air or bring a show back if they're going to make money off of it. Whereas, when you're looking at these like Netflix revivals, they're not being aired by the TV station that originally owned them. So I don't know how that works out financially, but it may be that the money is in a different spot, so Netflix is willing to pay for something that appeals to young people, whereas Fox is willing to, without having to pay for the rights, because they already own the rights to whatever degree. So that could be part of it. I don't think you're wrong, but that's why I think it's interesting that you're talking about Coach as a show that you can't see them bringing back, because I definitely watched Coach, but I don't think Coach was on to appeal to me. Right?
No, that would be definitely like our parents.
That was an ultimate like parents show.
Yeah. That's a good point. I don't.
Right.
it's interesting then, like with Gilmore Girls, and maybe I don't know the rights behind it, like why they're taking that to Netflix versus the CW.
Well, because it was originally on,
It was originally on the WB,
right,
and
then
WB kept it when it merged with
ceased to
UPN.
exist?
Like UPN and the CW, excuse me, and WB merged together,
Okay.
and Gilmore Girls survived the merge.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's a Warner Brothers owned show or
Right.
or what. But I'm surprised. 'Cause I would figure, despite the fact that the CW is now the superhero channel, but that they wouldn't be interested in airing this show while their other series are on hiatus for like the winter time or something. It's weird that Netflix snagged it, because I figured
Right.
for CW, which have lower standards in terms of ratings, it would be a no-brainer, and this would be an easy win for them. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe other deals were cut. So
No, right. So it would be interesting, I think, to also look at who's making the money off of these things. I don't know what the answer to that is, but so it'll be interesting to see, if we do start, especially as our generation gets older, are they going to keep appealing to people that are currently our age, or are they going to keep trying to appeal to our generation, and we're going to just get more and more decrepit stars on TV trying to appeal to us, like, hey, youth.
I'm honestly curious to see what's going to happen. We've had lately TV series, within the last 10 to 15 years, we've had movies that have had sequels years after the series had ended. You had Die Hard sequel, you had an Indiana Jones sequel. Up until the reboot, Sony was hell-bent on trying to make a Ghostbusters sequel featuring the original cast. And then that kind of got shied away from for a while. You still had your remakes and reboots. But then when Star Wars The Force Awakens hit, which featured the original cast, and that made over $1 billion worldwide, I kind of wonder if studios are they're gonna try to chase the money by saying, "Well, they had a sequel with the original cast, and that was 30 years ago. What other properties can we exploit?" And since then, we've had announcements for a new Indiana Jones film. They're trying to force out another Die Hard. The TV we're getting revivals. They're going to try to make another Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I think would be the first example of a series that had a reboot and then they debooted it back. But so I'm curious if like the Star Wars effect is going to go out to like other media and other films trying to capture this revival sort of thing. I don't know. And
So that's interesting, because that is something I think neither of us have really talked about so far, is that much in the same way that out of all the movies that came out in the past few years, X percentage of them were reboots, remakes, part of existing cinematic universes, etc. You definitely are seeing fewer and fewer original movies out there. I think that's one of the things that, I was talking about how I liked seeing Arrival. One of the reasons it was great was it wasn't connected to anything. I guess it's based on a short story, but it wasn't a remake. It wasn't a reboot. It didn't have Spider-Man in it. I enjoyed that.
Now I don't want to watch it.
Oh, God. And I know the number one way to get you to watch things is to lie to you and tell you Spider-Man's in them. How could I do this? Well, it's still a good movie. But
Wait, hold on. Amy Adams isn't playing Lois Lane, and Jeremy Renner's not playing Hawkeye? I thought it was the crossover between DC and Marvel. Is that?
there's
that
there's
the
going to
case?
be a crossover, but it's not going to be those two, because Hawkeye, I think, is out for a few movies. I'm not saying he's gone forever, but I think he's out for a little while.
Did they kill him in the last one? I haven't seen a Marvel movie in so long.
No, they haven't killed him. But he seemed to retire at the end of the last Avengers.
Oh, Iron. How many times has Iron Man retired?
Well, I'm not saying that's not fair. But some of this is coming up against contracts too, because a lot of the Marvel stars only signed on for 3 movies of their own and 3 movies
like the team up movies.
Right. So like literally if they didn't bring back Tony Stark, it would be because they'd have to sign a brand new contract with Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Downey Jr., while still a beautiful man, is getting to be, 65, 70?
He's not that old, but yes, you're right. He is getting up there in age.
He's getting up there. So to go back to my original point, which was, I think a lot of these, I think a lot of the same impulse is, in Hollywood of not wanting to take chances, thinking that they have to only work with existing properties. Maybe why we're seeing so many revivals. It may just be TV following what Hollywood has already been doing for years.
Yeah. And it's not the first time that there's been revivals years after the fact with the original cast, like going back to the original Star Trek series. It was on TV for 3 years, off the air for 10 years, and then they kicked off a movie series that lasted the better part of a decade and a half. And stuff like this has been going on, but I think on TV it's a relatively newer phenomena with so many coming out so quickly under a short period of time.
Right.
And what's even more perplexing to me, I feel, is that we live in a world that we have Netflix, we have DVDs, sure. We have a lot of these shows are at our fingertips that, hey, I've never seen this series. I'm going to load it up and start watching. That it's weird that they want to do a revival when you can go back and watch the originals at almost any time, or you have access to them.
And I think the other thing I find sort of interesting about it is, a lot of times when you look at a TV show that's been on the air for a long time, something like a Gilmore Girls, which was on for 7 seasons. Usually there's kind of a peak at some point on the show, season 3, season 4, where you're kind of at the maximum audience. And then you start losing people because you start losing cast members and somebody who only watched the show because this person was on, so then that section of the watchers quit. And then you've got, other shows going up against it and different things. And so usually by the end of a show, you've got very expensive actors because they're all either under contract or they have to get their contract renewed. Yeah. So you've got very expensive actors and you're not really going to build a new audience. So I think it's also interesting because I don't know, if you're looking at, if you put Orange is the New Black on Netflix, you can have basically anyone who subscribes to Netflix watch it. But I don't know that anyone who hasn't already seen Gilmore Girls is going to pick up the Gilmore Girls revival.
Right.
It seems like you're automatically going for a smaller piece of the pie than you have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I've never watched Gilmore Girls. If I wanted to start watching, I'm not going to start with the revival. I'll start with episode 1.
Right.
And then work my way up through the 900 episodes or however many they had.
And you may never get there. So I think it's really interesting. I think something like a Marvel Cinematic Universe, you may get a bunch of people who have never read a comic book who are willing to watch a movie. But I don't know that, that you're going to get a ton of people interested in watching a show that they've never seen before.
Right. So as we wrap up here, because I think we've exhausted as much as we could talk about this, what show would you want them to bring back next?
Oh, gosh.
Wait, stop that thought. I want to go back 2 seconds before we get into that.
Wait, we haven't exhausted the topic yet.
There's one other show I wanted to bring up, which had a interesting revival method. Veronica Mars, when it had its revival movie a couple years ago, which was kickstarted. Because, people like to donate $1 million so they can see their Veronica Mars movie. But when we have real problems in the world like hunger and natural disasters, they can't give money to that. I'm sorry, did that sound like kind of snotty? Well, it meant
you sounded very snotty.
Yeah.
But I think you do that.
I wonder, and I remember when that show came out, or that movie came out, they're like every other article was like, what show's going to get revived next through Kickstarter? And so far,
Right.
none oh, no, I take that back. Mystery Science Theater 3000 has, but beyond that, very few have.
Hmm.
So,
So
yeah.
right. So I think that's interesting because, again, I was talking about how you have this kind of limited fan base who are going to watch your revival. And I think so it's one thing for the fans to show up passively for a Fuller House. It's another thing to like sit there and demand that they want Veronica Mars. And then for some reason everyone involved in Veronica Mars just like agrees to it. And then a bunch of movie theaters put the movie in their theater, and that costs them money. So I find that whole thing very interesting, but I don't know that it would have worked except that they were, so you've mentioned two shows there, but I don't know that you could do that with just any show because you have to get somehow like the right fans and the right, so you have to get the fans together who both want the thing and are willing to put their money where their mouth is. And I feel like a lot of people are willing to tweet that they want to see something come back, but I don't know how many people are willing to reach into their own pocket and agree to pay people who probably already have enough money.
Right. Yeah, the Veronica Mars thing was definitely an experiment that paid off, and I'm sure everyone involved, at least in terms of the cast and whatnot, they were all like, hey, if this happens, are you going to commit? And I'm guessing they all said, yeah, sure, that'd be fun. Versus like, yeah, we got it back, but we only were able to get back Kristen Bell. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's that. Okay, I'm sorry. I know you said we're almost done, but like now that you mention it, I do also want to point out how interesting I think it is, to watch something like, so let's go back to Fuller House because, I watched that show back in the day. And as far as I can tell, they got back pretty much everybody who was on the show to varying amounts of commitment, except
the Olsen
Michelle
twins.
Tanner, right? Because they were basically like, we don't need your money or your love. And I think it's really interesting to see kind of what shows are not only, because I think you do look really bad if you can't come back to the show that made you famous. Because Melissa McCarthy, so there was a whole thing where she was originally from Gilmore Girls, which is not something I, as a non-Gilmore Girls fan, realized. I didn't realize she was like on the show where that's where she really got her start.
Yeah.
And then so she had said on Twitter or, in the news or something that they hadn't invited her back. And then that forced the creator of the show to be like, no, of course we want to see if we can get you back. And supposedly she's going to be part of the revival or is in the revival, maybe not in a huge thing, but is in at least one or two scenes. So I think it's kind of interesting because I think there's also this like social pressure on people who are currently acting at the very least to come back to these shows, and not everybody who is in Hollywood stays in Hollywood. I mean, the Olsen twins haven't acted in something since they hit puberty, essentially.
The West was fun.
Absolutely. And, I'm not going to pretend I never saw any of those movies. Obviously I did. But they haven't had to act in a long time and they don't care. And so it's sort of interesting, it'll be sort of interesting to see, especially these days with Twitter and, where we feel, I think, more, where you have these sort of parasocial relationships with celebrities where there's this kind of one-sided sense that like, oh, I know everything about Chris Evans, aka Captain America, because I follow him on Twitter. So here are my opinions on his clothes and his girlfriend and his hair and of course Chris Evans doesn't know anything about you, but you feel like not only do you know Chris Evans, but you're going to feel like, oh, if I think he should be on this TV show, that was a bad example. I don't know if he's ever been on TV, but
I see what you're saying. Like,
right. If you
start
feel
to
like Craig T. Nelson needs to come back to TV, then of course you're going to start demanding he show up on Coach.
So should I start hate tweeting Craig T. Nelson and bully him into signing up for a new season of Coach?
I think
the message? Is that the message?
I'm not saying you should, but I'm saying I think you could. because now more than ever, fans feel like actors owe them.
Yeah.
I made you famous.
I feel
Dance
that they
puppet.
owe me.
I do think that, I think that may be another part of it we didn't consider, is this, there may be some entitlement from the fan base.
In some cases, I would think so, especially if you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Absolutely. If I'm paying you, Kristen Bell, you better show up. You better Veronica Mars your little heart out.
And you bring all your little friends with, too.
Right. You find all of the other people who were on that show, none of whom I can name.
But anyway, let's since we got on that tangent there, let's go back to the original question to wrap us up here. What TV show do you want them to bring back as a limited revival?
Oh, that's really hard, because part of the problem is if they brought back my show and then they didn't get the future as I envisioned it, I think I'd be really mad. But you know what? I'm gonna go with a classic here. I'm gonna say, if I had to pick a show, if I had to bring a show back, I'd want to see what happened to the people in Friends. I would. And that's one that I feel like, especially on the BuzzFeed listicles, every so often, a rumor goes around that there's going to be a Friends revival, and every time I think, this could be terrible, but okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay, how about you? What's your answer?
I don't know. This may not be fair, but I would be curious to see a Star Trek Next Generation revival. I don't see it happening because no one cares about Star Trek Next Generation anymore. They've moved on to the reboot and everything else, and that cast is really aged poorly. But the exception is Patrick Stewart, who seems to actually be getting younger for some reason. But
sure.
I don't know. I think that would be, before they announce the new Star Trek series that's coming out on CBS All Access sometime next year, and there's a rumor that Netflix was going to do a Star Trek TV show, an original one. My first thought would be, do it, what the kids call a TNG show, because it would bring in the older fans. It would still be a way, because that show was kind of standalone, still be a way to sort of appeal to newer fans as well, because there's not a lot of baggage that goes with it. And on Netflix, using the Netflix model, you don't need to have gangbuster ratings. I think it would be the best of both worlds to put in a Star Trek reference there, which probably went over your head, but that's okay. So I'd be curious to see that show get a revival, but I know that's never going to be a possibility. That'll never happen. So I guess that's an unrealistic show to request. But
it doesn't matter. This is your fantasy world. This is what you want.
Are there any shows you wish they would never ever bring back?
I mean, most of them, because here's the thing about the show. Like, what you loved was the show, but what you also loved was how you felt watching the show at the time. Mm-hmm. And you're never going to feel that again, because you're never going to be that person you were when you watched the show in the past. Because you are now 5, 10, 15 years older. Things have changed. Your life is different. You are never going to have that experience of coming home after the third grade and watching Full House again. So bringing a show back is not going to do that for you. And any show that's going to come back, the only way I'm going to accept it is if they let me into the writing room so I can make sure that what I wanted to happen happens. Because I am a child. Mm-hmm. Right. But yeah, that's how I feel. I don't want most of my previous shows to come back, because I just don't think it's often very emotionally satisfying. And to be fair, they have not brought back a lot of the shows that I personally wanted to watch. I might feel differently if it was something that I had felt passionately about at one point. Only time will tell, and literally time will tell, because this is not going to be the end of it. We are going to have so many more opportunities to ruin our childhoods in the future.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap this up here. Jen, thank you for joining me today. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we will see you in our next episode. You've been listening to the all-new CultureCast, where every episode is all new. Check out our blog, Zach and Nick's CultureCast, at znculturecast.wordpress.com, and find us on social media. Send us an email at nick.culturecast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and requests. Theme music by bensound.com. The all-new CultureCast, a saltwater production, copyright 2016.
So I found this package that previously had some cupcakes in it underneath my table, empty. And I don't know that the dog ate the cupcakes. You know, and it's hard to say. This could have happened today. This could have happened 2 days ago. So I may be reading too much into it. But right now he's sort of acting like a kid on a sugar rush. He probably ate the cupcake.